Two finished whiskeys and a bourbon walk into a bar. And
Yep. The short one leaves. Adios, guys. Have a
oh,
good one.
that was TJ. And he was exiting, leaving me with the punchline. And I don't have one.
Tonight we have another special evening, which is great. It's wonderful. Barrel sent out samples to a lot of the whiskey tubers, Instagram channels, everything like that. They sent out their private selections. So if you don't know, besides their regular releases, you can do single barrel picks with Barrel, and they blend stuff together, and you get to try it. They've got some finished stuff, obviously. They got some
Finished
blends,
whiskeys.
finished whiskeys, everything. So we, however, have two finished whiskeys and a bourbon. All right. So the first one tonight is the blended bourbon. So it is distilled in Tennessee, Kentucky, and Indiana. Hey, hey, hey.
Okay.
Sounds good to us. And this is a
Hopefully
cool
no
part.
hay.
So it is 75% a 5-year, 15% a 7-year, 5% a 9-year, and 5% a 14-year-old bourbon. It comes in at 119.94 proof. So I'm pretty excited with this.
So pretty heavy young. And also pretty heavy proof. So coming
Yes.
in plus 115 proof.
Well, it's barrel, so it's always going to be barrel proof.
Always barrel proof.
You got to love Barrell Craft Spirits for that.
Thank you.
So I get a lot of just like classic bourbon notes on the nose. You get caramel, vanilla, no grain, no young notes whatsoever.
No youngness, I would say. No. I get just like a honey sweet and like maybe a little bit of a not a young grain, but like of a straw note. Like there's some graininess there.
Definitely on the range of noses, it's a delicate nose, not overpowering in any way, which is surprising for basically being almost 120 proof.
Agreed. Yeah, the nose is fairly light, just a little bit. Again, like I get a little bit of a sweet grain.
Yeah. All right. Cheers, sir.
Cheers.
Ooh.
Ooh. That the palate initially reminds me a lot of batch 33.
Yeah.
I get a it's just this complex I get a little bit of a grain, this complex of butterscotch and caramel along with that grain note. It's really quite pleasant. A little bit of a toasted grain.
Yeah. So it starts out melted Werther's original and just coats your mouth nice. But then it transitions into like a grain forward bourbon. But this is what I feel like a lot of those craft distillers are trying to showcase. It's a delicious grain. Like it's like eating
Agreed.
cornbread. You get the good parts of a grain. Whereas a lot of the young stuff, it's like just so grain forward. It's
Yeah,
not good. So yeah.
not the
And
negative
then,
parts of the grain.
Mhm.
Encompasses the good parts of the grain as far as the sweetness and the nuttiness. That's what I appreciate about this, honestly, about at least in the palate. And again, it reminds me a lot of batch 33.
Yeah.
I think batch 33, I would tip its to hand to that
Yeah.
just as far as its complexity. But again, batch 33 was in the upper echelon of our,
Yeah.
at least particularly in the recent releases of Barrell.
All right. So try it again. I'm going to say one word and see if this changes it. So what I get is popcorn. Like right on the beginning before you get the Werther's original, like I get a little bit of like popcorn. Maybe it's when you pop popcorn on the air fryer or something like that, that little dust in the air smell, like I get that on the palate. And then it goes through all that stuff. I will
Yeah, a
say
bit of a roasted corn note.
Mhm. I feel like the palate or the finish is a little lacking.
I almost get that more of that popcorn note right as it like leaves the palate. So it's like heavy, what we talked about as far as the butterscotch and grain notes kind of well melded together in the palate. like the as you leave the palate, a little bit more of that. What I think of is like if I walk into a room and I just like somebody just fresh pop popcorn, like I get
Yep.
that and that transition from the palate to the finish, and the finish is a little light.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd go.
it leaves me a little lacking. It's
Yeah.
not bad. There's nothing obtrusive there. I just think it's that's something where like batch 33 I think hits it
Yeah.
just a little bit better.
It's worth a pickup. Like, again, nothing bad about it. I'm not gonna lie. If we did a single barrel pick and that's what we left with, I would be completely happy. But not up to batch 33 standards is kind of where I feel like the end answer is going to be.
That's where, yeah, I think that's my to summarize this is to say that this is very good. But I think I'd take batch 33. But that's also to say, like, seriously, batch like
Is one
we're
of the
going to
best.
be comparing things to batch 33 for years to come
Yeah.
because it's so freaking good.
Well, number one is a whiskey that's finished. I'm actually kind of excited about this. My father-in-law has been delving into this spirit. I know very little about it. Is an Amarero, Amaro, Amaro. I don't know. It's an Italian thing, I think. So it is finished in Saint Agrestis, Brooklyn, Amaro casks. So, yeah, we will see. I don't know. It is blend DJ A2 and comes in at 123.22 proof. Chuck is going to look it up. I'll give.
I'm totally looking it up, doing the research that you should have done initially.
Well, while he does that, the nose is amazing.
After dinner digestive,
There we go.
Classic of.
It's an aperitif.
Usually a bittersweet.
I said a aperitif. Fancy word.
You did. I'm proud of you.
I get sugary cinnamon Cinnabons on the nose.
Sugary cinnamon Cinnabons.
With black licorice. Anise. Look at that. Second fancy word. I'm done for the night.
Anise. Yeah. Well done. Hannah would be proud. Not Hannah's.
That is the type of nose that wins best whiskey of the year right there.
What do you like about this nose?
It's so unique. I haven't had many noses like this.
I like there's like a little bit of a spot, like you said, anise. I do believe like there's a little bit of like a little bit of black licorice is probably the right. But that's not the dominant note. It's more sweet to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it'd almost be like if it was a black licorice birthday cake. So it's like
it's mostly sweet. Like you get this this mostly sweet, but this like a little bit of a sharpness.
Yeah,
the palate is.
I don't know how I feel. Like there's a lot going on. Holy cow!
Use your words.
So it started with like apple cinnamon, like a apple cider, apple cinnamon, apple cider. And then it just took like a sharp left turn, sharp right turn, a loop-de-loo to other flavor things. I gotta like analyze this. There's several like distinct transition zones.
Oh yeah, I get a lot of like it transitions to a spice to me. It's like it's a cardamom spice. You still get a little bit of a hanging sweet,
and then it ends with like black licorice and hay.
Maybe like a little bit of cardamom chai.
Yes. There we go.
I don't get as much of the hay. But yeah, I can go. I can agree with it. It's mostly spice.
Yeah. I would agree that if you are a tea drinker, this would be your jam. Like it very much reminds me of a chai tea or a chai latte, but no coffee.
Yeah.
I don't drink tea. I drink.
What's your Starbucks order, TJ?
It is a caramel macchiato unless it's Christmas, and then it is the
unless it's Christmas
mocha, the whatever the Christmas drink is.
Peppermint
But
mocha.
yes, I like my peppermint mocha.
We're gonna ignore that for a second. Back to this. I think this is mostly like a chai,
Woo.
chai and
Wow.
cardamom. This is like a Middle Eastern tea to me.
Yeah. So this is the first one. I'm going to say it's good, but it's not for me. Uh, this I feel like is going to take a very special type of person, a very adventurous type of person. Now, I will say this: had I bought this not knowing what it was and it was on my bar, I would not be sad. I would not go to it very often, and but it would be one that, like, as I had friends over that were like, "Oh, I want to try something super special," this is what I would do. The best example I can go to is one that I like because it just hits my notes is the cigar blend from
Oh,
Starlight, which I know you aren't as big of a fan of it. Like,
it's super unique.
yeah. But that's very much what this is. This is like super unique, but you're not going to be like, oh, yeah, I want to drink that every night. It's going to be like, I'm in the mood for something like way out in left field. All right, let's grab this.
Way out in left field, not your classic bourbon. I agree. But I don't think it's that far out. Like to me, this is a really nice like for one, the finish is probably better than the previous as far as
Yeah.
like long lasting. And it has more of the characteristic, I'd say, whiskey notes. But yeah, like the nose and the palate, as we express, like they do possess some interesting expressions of that finishing barrel that others do not.
Yeah.
So it's a bit unique, but to me, like I would reach to this more regularly than probably you would
Yeah.
based upon your opinion. So to me, this is really good. Like I like the uniqueness. I like the balance of flavors. I like where it takes me in the flavor profile. It takes me
Yeah.
beyond the classic bourbon notes. It takes me beyond that. It makes me think about bourbon or whiskeys in a way that I probably wouldn't have otherwise, and that I appreciate.
I think it's fair to say it's a cocktail in a glass that you don't have to mix and is not super sweet.
Bingo.
So number 3 here is another whiskey, but it is a ruby port barrel. So it is distilled. I got distilled in Kentucky and Indiana on the back. Oh, I messed that on the last one. The previous one was Kentucky and Indiana too. So there we go. Yeah. So this is another private release and it's a whiskey. And it's finished in ruby port barrels. So I always like me some good port. Another aperitif. I would say we're back to the same nose as number 1 as far as it is a delicate nose. It's not in your face port or in your face whiskey or bourbon or anything like that. Very light and a little hints of port on there, but they're there.
Ooh. Palate kind of continues for me. I
Yeah.
get maybe the nose to me conceals some of the spiciness. I think than I get in the palate, and
Yeah.
some of that could be the proof point coming through. But it's also maybe just a little bit of like a sweet spice. Like it's almost like a spiced wine, a mulled wine. That's kind of what I get on that palate.
Yeah. I would say it's super dark, rich fruits that you would normally get with a port, but then mixed with like the sweetness you would get from a whiskey and the spice that you get from the fact that it's 123.9 proof.
Mm.
And then it transitions to the finish. And it just kind of is where it was on the palate, but then just slowly like fades off, which is very interesting.
Yeah, there's almost, we don't know the history of these finishing barrels or the whiskey to a great degree, but it's almost like some of that spice in the palate to me reminds me of a little bit of a young toasted, like a young finishing barrel note,
Yeah.
um, which I have nothing to go off of as far as the description that we provide by, but to me, it gives you a little bit of a young oak, some of those notes that
Yeah, I would
like
say
a
there's
little bit of a nutmeg or an allspice note.
yeah, a little bit of a toasted oak. This one, I'm going to say out of all of them, this one is my favorite, which
God,
is DJX2. But yeah, no, it's delightful. The port is wonderful. It's I like it because other finishes like the finished product takes the dominant note, and I'd even say on the other one, the Amararo Kosk, whatever it is, definitely I feel like that took the dominant note. But on the port, it the whiskey and the port like fight back and forth for the dominant note. So you get a little bit of that and a little bit of the whiskey and a little bit of the port and a little bit of the whiskey. And I really, really like that. Now, however, I would love to have the GXA1 finished in port barrels. I feel like that would be probably really
mm.
good. But
So I'm gonna offer I love this port finished, but
mm-hmm.
I think I'm gonna go with that Amaro
Yeah,
finished as my personal favorite. And honestly, I think I'm gonna go with just the bourbon as my second,
yeah.
and go with the port finished as my least favorite.
So we're
So
basically the exact opposite, which works. Why would we want
here
anything
we go.
else?
This is what happens when you get three really good bourbons and or whiskeys.
Once again, Barrel, thank you for sending us samples. We will always gladly drink your stuff and give it the rightful fair review it deserves. But I think what's fair to say is if you don't have one of their regular batches on your shelf yet and you have a large bourbon collection, you should. Um, and I think they're kind of setting themselves up for a really good part of the market, which is, and I know Chuck is going to feel this way and agree with me here. Bardstown Bourbon, their finished stuff is getting a little expensive. It's hitting in
A
the
little, it's
140s.
2x price this.
Right. It's well, that's my point. Is it was justifiable when it was like 120, 130. Now that it's getting up to like 150, 160, I think Barrel's your go-to like finished product if you want to try a ruby port finished, if you want to try something like that. Yeah, Bardstown, I still think is the king of finished products. But I think when you factor in price and availability, I think is coming for them. And they're not raising their prices at all. So if you like finished bourbon and or finished whiskey and you're interested in finishing products, I think you kind of got to give Barrel a shot. Because again, tonight there wasn't a bad one on the shelf. And I think like the Ruby Port, I think that would be fun to blind against Midwinter Night Drum. And I have a feeling Barrel might take it. Because lately the Midwinter Night Drum's kind of been disappointing. So I think at the end of the day, what you should take from this is if you are a big lover of bourbon and finished whiskeys and just exploring in general, you should have a Barrel product on your shelf. And whether they gave us free samples or not, we would say that because they continually are in our top 5 in bourbon and whiskey every year. And that's how we feel. So
we provide you an honest feedback. And that's our goal on this channel.
Yep.
But we're also conversely super supporters of Barrel because of what they do. They provide honestly consistent quality product at an unbelievable price in today's bourbon market. To TJ's point, as far as who is the premier finisher, hard to argue with what he said. I used to always buy Bardstown Bourbon Company finished products at their price, but at $170, take a second guess. Untitled, I don't.
Yep.
Barrel, I don't. So those two products to me are hand in hand, and particularly to me, Barrel's in there in the blending of bourbon, like straight bourbons, quality products that should be on your shelf. As you see these 20 some bottles behind
Yeah.
me.
Yep. So, all right. So with that, thanks again for watching. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Stay neat.